There were talk of a cabinet reshuffle before the Vesak full moon Poya day. However, what happened? The cabinet reshuffle seemed to have postponed until the Prime Minister arrives in Sri Lanka from China. Then there was talk about hosting black flags to protest the arrival of Narendra Modi. This was announced by former Minister Vimal Veerawansa at the May Day rallies organized by the joint opposition. What exactly happened? The former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa, as well as the former Minister of External Affairs Professor G.L. Peris met with the Indian Prime Minister who was visiting the country. What exactly is happening right now in Sri Lanka? Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. A lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. Trust, honesty, humility, transparency and accountability are the building blocks of a positive reputation. Is the government's reputation at stake? Is there good governance? Where is transparency? To discuss all this and more, we have with us in the studios three eminent personalities. We're expecting another to arrive in the studios shortly. Let me introduce them to you. Joining us this evening is Mr. Lakshan Dias, attorney at law as well as human rights activist. Nice to have you on board, Mr. Dias, as always. Also joining us this evening on the show is Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva, former Commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission. Nice to have you on board as well, Dr. Mahanameheva. Also joining us this evening is Gehan Gunatilaka, Research Director, Veta Research, and also attorney at law. Nice to have you on board again, Gehan. So let's start off tonight's discussion with Lakshan Dias, attorney at law as well as human rights activist. Now, Mr. Dias, with regard to transparency, this is a very big question mark in the mind frame of many. The reason being, we saw the National Human Rights Action Plan coming into play a few months ago, which would be in effect until 2021, starting from the year 2017. However, even the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka has not seen the contents of the National Human Rights Action Plan. Why?
I think this is a problematic thing, and also I think I'm really happy of what the present Human Rights Commission doing, and they are genuinely trying their best to do something for the people and on human rights. So in that scenario, it's very important that they know the contents of the Human Rights Action Plan, because they can contribute and they are partly implementing of it. But if they claim that they don't know about it, so that there is a serious issue. And also I think that what we saw in the papers was that when certain issues comes, cabinet want to decide what they feel that is good and is not good. I mean, the issues like the issues of section 365 of the penal code, and issues on gays and lesbians, these things were not even discussed in a wider forum. It came to cabinet and it was totally rejected. And I don't know why these things were not. I mean, yes, society may not accept at once, but these kind of dialogues are needed. And then,
but when you say these were the regulations put forward by the European Union when the GSP Plus was to approve. However, it seems now that this was clearly not a regulation or even a prerequisite for the GSP Plus concession, Lakshan.
I totally not agree with that comment saying that it was put forward by the EU. Now, who brings these issues to EU is our people, those who are affected, those who are from the civil society, and also those who are affected. So these are the requests from our society, where EU has noted down saying these are the discriminations. So therefore, when they have imposed certain conditions, they bring over, can you accommodate these situations, can you do some changes into your laws? That because we request, I, as a human rights activist, always request from whatever delegation comes from Europe or elsewhere or UN, that we have to relax the laws on human rights into gays, lesbians and transgender also people. So these are not European conventions, these are not something imposed by the European, these are our needs, these are our human rights. So this whole notion of EU imposing things on us, I don't agree. But the problem is, sometimes part of cabinet or some group within the cabinet, they don't like some of these things. They say these are Western. I don't agree.
What you're trying to say is that public discourse is a must.
Yes.
In a democracy.
Whether it's approved or not, there should be public discourse. There should be public discourse on human rights action plan. People need to know what it inside, and then they can comment on. Thereafter they can decide, they can put into parliament and get approved. But if everything is decided by the cabinet, I don't agree with that. That should not be the way that we expect from the Yahapalana government, because when we support Yahapalana government, we expect them to be transparent in every manner what they are doing.
And now you're talking about transparency, you're saying that public discourse is a must. Now there is talk of a counter-terrorism act to be brought forward. No one knows. We see certain elements to be published in newspapers. However, people really don't know the contents of this as well. Then there is talk about a media council to be established. Again, people are not aware. We saw how the National Audit Bill came into play. We saw how the Exchange Control Act came into play. Transparency is a big question mark in the mind frame of the civil society in Sri Lanka at present, Lakshan.
History repeats, Shamir. In 1979, when they brought this counter-terrorism laws in first time as PTA, the public thought this is something they bring against the terrorism or those who are armed. But what happened, we know over the years, the same act used to repress or stop the activities of opposition. The first 3 people arrested under PTA were not Tamils, were not armed people. They were 3 SLFPs from Kandy. So this is how. So I'm really cautioning of any type of counter-terrorism laws in Sri Lanka. Whatever type of counter-terrorism laws are dangerous, and therefore it must bring into public discourse the human rights groups, civil society, political parties, public. Everybody should discuss this, and we must bring our ideas also, and then only we can think of. I think this is where, I mean, even the other bills that press council and all sort of bills need to be discussed. I mean, that's why what's happened in the past, they brought laws without discussing anything, finally ended up with a real repression in media, in civil life, in human rights, in democracy, everything.
Thank you very much, Lakshan Dias, attorney at law as well as a human rights activist. Something interesting that Lakshan just mentioned, he said that history is repeating itself. I now move my attention to Dr. Pratibha Mahanamheva, former commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission. Dr. Mahanamheva, I'm going to pose your question right now to you as a civil rights activist. You have been very vocal about good governance. You've been very vocal about how transparency takes place. You've also been very vocal about the joint opposition in Sri Lanka. I want to drag your attention to what happened on the 1st of May this year. There were large crowds at the joint opposition rally at Galle-Face, and you saw one of the strongmen of the joint opposition, former Minister Vimal Weerawansa, stating in public that black flags need to be hoisted to protest the arrival of Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, to Sri Lanka. However, we saw former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, former Minister of External Affairs Professor G.L. Pires, former Secretary of Defence Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, meeting the Indian Prime Minister under closed doors. Seems to me that they did not think that the Prime Minister of India would approve such a meeting. Time starts now. What is the role of the joint opposition actually?
Now, you asked 3 questions. I'll come one by one. May 1st incident and Modi's visit. Honorable Modi, Prime Minister of India's visit, and the black flag case. Now, May 1st incident, it's where one slogan, those who are against the government rally round in Goldface. For that slogan, which really impressed the mass. And I think more than 200,000 participated for that. Because there is an anger against this government. Whatever they say, are they fulfilling? I'll give you one example. Appointment of ambassadors. Where is the merit list? Any person support government? Those who are in the opposition? Post was given. So there is no policy even. Not only transparency. So May 1st Goldface incident, that is where may not be for the joint opposition, may be people's voice. So the government must understand now people aspirations. So they thought the best place to be and to show this voice in Goldface with the former president. That people wish. I mean, other rallies also people participated. But the main issue is this. No municipality council elections. Now this is the only government postponing these elections for a long time. Even previous UNP government, they have not done it. Even with the earlier system you can conduct. Now where is the report? What's the ministry is saying? Nothing about that. And Geneva resolution? After March? Nothing. Where is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which were promised in Geneva? All these are words. Even my argument, any cabinet reshuffle which can take place but no impact. But no impact, only the heads may change. So therefore, one thing, it was a red light given to the government, not only by the joint opposition, but also by the people in this country. Second one, Prime Minister Modi's visit. Yes, I think opposition parties, some said, to come up with black flags because they have the JVP background. Now earlier, 88-89 period I can remember, they had a long protest against India, and also they started with this. But what happened? Why they want to stage that? Because of they thought signing agreements, but no agreements were signed, and former president and those ministers, former ministers.
What would be the intention like of the former president to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi? The contents of this meeting was not revealed to the media. Given the fact that a strong member of the joint opposition makes such a statement, and then you have the leader-like figure in the joint opposition, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, going and meeting the Prime Minister of India, does it really reflect the ultimate objective? Or it seems like a petty agenda comes into play once again from the joint opposition.
I am not sure about the contents, but India is very concerned about Sri Lanka. This is my personal view.
This has been the case
even
since
the
1980s.
Even the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of India speech, I think he may be thinking Sri Lanka is a part of India. There are certain statements coming up. Meeting world leaders and former leaders, I think, to build up a good relationship.
Oh, okay, let's say Minister Vimal Veeravansa, former Minister Vimal Veeravansa's genders are different to that of the joint opposition. If that was the case, even flags were not seen, black flags were not even seen at former Minister Vimal Veeravansa's residence.
I can't speak on behalf of
No, but the thinking is,
but I mean,
what are they trying to do?
What
is the ultimate objective?
I am not really supporting for these black flag cases. If a foreign leader is coming for religious activities to celebrate certain things, yes, warmly welcome. But if the leader is coming to sign any agreement like 1987 Lanka impact, you saw what happened. So it was not a real thing like when Rajiv Gandhi, former president, Prime Minister, visited and signed certain agreements. So I think they may have changed their strategies because of this. That's my personal view.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pratibha Mahanam, former Commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission. I now move my attention to Gehan Gunathilaka, Research Director, Vector Research, and also attorney at law. Gehan, nice to have you on the show. You represent a think tank, a research organization. What is the sentiment like right now amongst the public about how this government is moving forward?
Well, if we were to look at lawmaking, for example, you raised the issue earlier about transparency. I think there is some level of suspicion about the contents of various laws that are being drafted. I think, as someone pointed, I think Lakshan pointed out quite correctly, there is a need to really open out these processes to public scrutiny. And the government has not been particularly sound when it comes to this sort of thing, this transparency that is required. I think there are two good reasons to seek a more transparent lawmaking approach. One is a principled reason. I think it's important to distinguish between rulers and representatives, and what we have here are representatives and not rulers. So the legislature, parliament, really when it engages in lawmaking, it is doing so on behalf and representing people. So if the people are cut out of the process, there's something fundamentally flawed. And I think on a principled footing, lawmaking must be opened out to public scrutiny. The second is, of course, a practical reason. I think it's very important to secure public support for the laws that you're drafting. And when you don't really secure that support at an early stage, you're bound to encounter resistance, you're bound to encounter suspicion. And you can illustrate this point when you look at how the Right to Information law was drafted. It was opened out very early on in the process. The Media Ministry published a draft very early on in the process, and the public got an opportunity to input into the drafting process, provide some suggestions on the draft. Civil society got an opportunity to raise awareness on the contents of the draft, and overall there was public support that was generated by the time the bill came to Parliament. And what happened? It was passed unanimously. Even the joint opposition did not have really an opportunity to oppose this bill, which really enjoyed so much public support. This is the way to pass laws, particularly in a coalition setting. You contrast that with the counterterrorism proposals. This has been shrouded in mystery. And naturally, every time a draft is leaked to the media, it is resisted by civil society because there is suspicion around the contents. Right now, we don't know if the proposals have been finalized or not. We're told that the legal draftsman has got a copy of the proposals and now it's been converted into a bill form. But unfortunately, we don't know whether this is the final version. So I think there needs to be a lot more transparency in the lawmaking process. I think public expect that, and this is something that the government has to work on.
Gehan, when it comes to accountability as well as bringing bills, let's talk about the aspect of a little bit about the Office of the Missing Persons, which was brought very haphazardly by the government last year, just around the corner for the Geneva sessions, never materialized. However, you have an act passed in Parliament. What is happening? No one knows.
Well, it's very simple actually. The Act has a provision which requires the President to assign the ministry to a particular, or the Act to a particular ministry, without which the Act can't be operationalized. Because this particular Act can only be operationalized by a minister by appointing a date in the Gazette. Now, unfortunately, when all the ministries were assigned in September 2015, the Act didn't exist. So there is no minister for the Act. Only the President under the Constitution can assign a portfolio to a particular ministry. So until the President takes action to assign this Act to a particular minister, we cannot go forward. So the ball is in the President's court. He has to act. Now, what the government has said is there were certain amendments that needed to be passed before the Act can be operationalized. There is this amendment bill that has now found its way to Parliament. I think the second reading is due. And the promise is that once this second reading is completed, once the Act is passed, the amendment is finalized, the minister will be appointed. But it's anyone's guess as to when this will happen. As I said, the ball is firmly in the President's court.
Again, before I move to Mr. Nagananda Kurituaku, attorney at law, who just arrived a couple of minutes ago, I want to drag your attention to the proposed cabinet reshuffle that was to take place before the Vesak full moon Poya day. Based on the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, the President has the power to take a unilateral decision if he wishes to reshuffle the cabinet without the consent of the Prime Minister.
So there's a legal perspective and there's a political perspective. Legally speaking, if you look at the constitutional provisions, yes, you're absolutely right. The President can change the composition, no, not the composition, but reshuffle the portfolios within cabinet without necessarily changing the composition of cabinet. So he can't dismiss anyone, he can't reappoint anyone into cabinet without the consent of the Prime Minister, but he can change the portfolios without the consent of the Prime Minister. That seems to be the only interpretation that we can give to the Constitution provisions. Politically speaking, that's very unlikely. This is a coalition government. You're not going to really find a situation where the President will act unilaterally, because ultimately the cabinet composes both UNFGG cabinet ministers as well as the UPFA Sirisena faction cabinet ministers. So this is ultimately a cabinet of consent and consensus. He needs to get the buy-in and agreement of the Prime Minister to move forward. But as you said quite rightly, under the Constitution, it is the President who can act.
And let's say the Prime Minister says no, the President can still go ahead and reshuffle the cabinet.
Then we're basically looking at the end of the coalition.
Thank you very much, Gehan, for your thoughts on the first round. Let's now move our attention to Mr. Nagananda Kurituaku, attorney at law. The last time Mr. Kurituaku was on the show, you were very, very vocal about certain bills that was to be brought forward. Weeks after, we saw the Supreme Court stating that the bill, the exchange control bill, was in line with the country's constitution. Did this surprise you in any way?
Exactly. No doubt about not just me. Probably the whole nation was surprised, because we cannot really now, since the ruling has been already made by the Supreme Court and reported to the Speaker, now it is at the stage of enacting the bill and the committee stage. However, the provisions in the bill, I can recollect on that particular day this matter was taken up in the Supreme Court. The Attorney General, when after my submission made about, particularly about the Article 29, Section 29 of the new bill, which refers to...
Let's not go to the nitty-gritties of the bill per se, Mr. Kurituaku, because it has now been approved by the Supreme Court and it has been announced by the Speaker himself. So we have to be very careful when drawing a line between yes or no.
Yeah.
But tell me, what is the way forward now? You have a bill that is coming into play. What are the intricacies that we are to expect in the next couple of months when this bill comes into action?
There are so many instances where the bills have been dropped by the government, even after approved by the Supreme Court, or even with or without the approval of the Supreme Court. Some bills, although it's stable in the Parliament, sometimes government, dropped at some stage without enacting the bill. It could happen to this bill as well. No one knows about it, because there are some other bills now on their way, customs new bill and the exchange and the inland revenue bill, and all these bills, if you study the content, and you will observe that all restrictions, prohibitions, you find in these laws have been completely done away with. I don't know exactly the right answer, whether it's the right thing to do. But I don't think the people will approve if the people in this country will accept this process. Because
but the majority, the masses of the country are not even aware. They don't even care what bill comes into play or to Parliament for that matter. They are only worried about their stomachs at the moment. If that is the case, what is the responsibility of the civil society in order to make the people cognizant about what exactly is happening around them?
Yeah, people can agitate. They can raise their concerns, but it is a very unfortunate thing. You know how even this, there are so many issues now Unfortunately, I don't know why people are not least bothered or concerned in this country. So it's a major issue in this. I don't know. I mean, even the learned people, so-called learned bodies, coming the professional, you get a lot of professional bodies in this country, and attorneys at law, I mean the Bar Association, then the GMOA, then OPA. There are so many professional bodies. They are, but I see these people are more concerned about their private life and their private affair. They are not least concerned about what is happening in this country.
Mr. Kuritaku, you made an interesting point. You spoke about the GMOA. In fact, did not want to bring this issue up in today's debate, but however, because you mentioned about the GMOA and the agendas of certain organizations, I want to drag your attention to what happened recently with regard to the protest that was launched by the GMOA, putting the people at risk, the majority of the people who paid for the education of these doctors. What are your thoughts on this?
I believe the stand taken by the GMO is not acceptable, because it shows that they are more concerned about their membership. Because before they become doctors, they are the citizens in this country. Even the lawyers are the same. Because unfortunately, all these professional bodies, they are more concerned about their membership rather than their country and the people. And I have already spoken to this, GMOA membership and the Executive Council. I said, you got to be more proactive and play a role, not just for your membership and the GMOA, and you have to be more concerned about what is happening in this country. Lawlessness, absolute failure of rule of law. These are the major concerns in this country. That is my concern, basically. So I totally disagree with the role that the GMOA play right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuritaku, for your thoughts as well on the first round. I open the floor for questions from our journalists, but before that, let me quickly introduce them to you. On to my right is Chaturanga Hapwaracha today. Nice to have you on board, Chaturanga.
Thank you, sir.
Also joining us this evening is attorney at law, Sonali Vanikabal. We have 5 attorneys at law in the studio tonight, Sonali. Also joining us this evening is Charita Fernando, our Newsfirst assistant manager on business-related affairs. So let's start off the floor. Let's start off with Sonali.
Thanks, Shamir. My first question is to Gehan. Gehan, right now there's a draft concept note on the legal and policy framework with regard to the counter-terrorism law. However, it's said that this looks more to be a cure far worse than the disease, in contrast with the Prevention of Terrorism Act number of 1978. What are the main areas of concern that this draft document poses?
So I assume that you're referring to the draft that was leaked in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago. Having looked at the draft, I can point to at least 3 serious problems. One is the definition of terrorism. It's one of the widest I've ever seen. It has harming unity as part and parcel of the definition of terrorism. And as you know, unity is a concept that is open-ended, it's vague, it's open to interpretation, and you're going to have members of the executive, and particularly law enforcement officers, interpreting what unity means when arresting a suspect.
So it is prone to abuse?
It is absolutely prone to abuse, because apart from the word unity, the draft already has words like territorial integrity and sovereignty. So one has to ask, what is this word unity adding to that list? And I really think that would be deeply problematic. And if you can think of scenarios like protests outside logistic facilities for essential services, that could be interpreted as terrorism under this draft. And
so the ambiguity is one of the main issues.
The vagueness, the ambiguity is one of the main issues. The other problem is that it has that absolutely terrible offense concerning the causing of communal disharmony through speech or words. This is the same offense that you find in the PTA It's been used against journalists like Thissanayagam. It's been used against political activists like Asad Sali. You can imagine that this provision, if it's retained in the new counterterrorism law, it will be used against dissenters, journalists, opponents of the state in the future, if not by this government, at least by a future government. So that's deeply problematic as well. And the third problem is, of course, the confidential information matter. There's an offense where someone who gathers confidential information for the purpose of passing it on to another person who commits an offense, also commits an offense. Now, if you combine that with the communal disharmony offense, you can imagine a government servant passing on confidential information to a journalist also being held a criminal or made a suspect under the law. We have to remember that whistleblowers are protected under the new right to information law, and this provision will potentially undermine that protection to whistleblowers.
So you say whistleblowers need to be protected. Mr. Kodituaku, this puts your role right now into a big question mark. In a few months, would you be...
Yeah, there's a provision to protect the whistleblowers, whereas in the other parts of the world, in the UK, there's a law called protection of whistleblowers. Whereas this bill, you know, very recently there was a custom officer was placed under interdiction for releasing the information about a leading case which involved a huge amount of revenue. And now the Director General take up the position under the Establishment Code. He is empowered to do so. But the new law, the Establishment Code is not a law, whereas the statute, that is Section 40 of the Constitution, this particular statute, the Right to Information Law, guarantee the protection of whistleblowers. So therefore, that particular act performed by the Director General of Customs, in my view, is a challenge, can be challenged.
So what Gehan says is quite alarming. So where does it put you? Does it worry you, Mr. Kodituaku? You are very vocal about what exactly is happening in government.
Because
you may be behind bars in a few months if this really comes into play. Does
so
this worry you?
If you observe the statement made by Mr. Ravi Karunanayak yesterday at 10 o'clock news, I watched it. He made the direct allegations against me. And I really have no business with politics. My only concern is about the citizens of this country and their democratic rights and the rule of law. And I don't know to what direction this country proceeds now. The way these people behave and the statement that they make, that's a direct attack, and it is completely unfounded. And it not even against me. He accused even the judges in the Supreme Court in that statement. And he said, why only the MPs are, why I pursue only against the MPs, why not the judges? It's a very serious statement made by the minister.
But why not, Mr. Kodituaku? Why not the judges? It is a question. You have put out the names of 92 parliamentarians, politicians, public representatives that have sold their vehicle permit to a third party.
Yeah.
And you have stopped there. Why not reveal the others as well?
If there is any such information, I will definitely do that. I am the only counsel in this country who has challenged 4 chief justices for judicial corruption in the Supreme Court. If there is any such abuse of office, of course I will take it up. But there is no such evidence.
But all this was possible, Mr. Kodituaku, because the Right to Information Act came into play. And you got this information because of the Right to Information Act. So you have to pat the back of the government in certain occasions and instances for a job well done. Don't you think so?
But the way it proceeds now, the way this government move forward, is very, very skeptical. I don't think that now I think they are worrying for enacting this particular provision of law.
That's a very subjective statement, Mr. Kodituaku. Yes,
my question is to for Gihan. Since our application is accepted by the European Parliament for the restoration of GSP+, do you think that our eligibility would attract more EU oversight? How do you think they would set about the monitoring aspect of adherence to the 27 international conventions?
So right now there is a EU-Sri Lanka working group on good governance, human rights and the rule of law. It was set up in anticipation of this monitoring mechanism. I think the EU will play a role in monitoring the human rights compliance of Sri Lanka. It will look at how these 27 conventions, which include not just human rights conventions but also environmental protection related conventions, labor conventions, anti-corruption conventions. This will be something that the EU will look into over the next 5 to 6 years, where we anticipate Sri Lanka will enjoy the benefits of the facility. But I don't think we can rely on international monitoring mechanisms. We can't rely on international scrutiny if we're serious about human rights. And I think the whole experience with the EU tells us that we really need local activism. The government has to engage the local civil society activists. It has to engage our National Human Rights Commission if it's serious about human rights compliance, because it is the local context that is vital. I'll give you a simple example. In the European context, legal access to counsel is provided at the outset. But a suspect who gives a statement to a police officer in the presence of a lawyer, that statement is admissible as evidence against the suspect. Now that's fine in a European context, that's fine in a American context perhaps, but I would say that is horrendous in a Sri Lankan context, because we know of how police and potentially lawyers can collude to deny fair trial rights to suspects.
So in this context, do you actually think that the government would engage with the civil society?
I hope so, and I think whether the government engages or not, civil society will resist any law that violates the constitution, violates the human rights of suspects in the future. So I don't think EU scrutiny alone will suffice. I think it has to be in combination with local scrutiny, and whether or not the EU cooperates in this matter, I think local civil society activists will make use of the space that has been given under this new government to resist oppressive and repressive laws.
Dr. Manav, a quick question to you. Now we saw how the journalists as well as the guests spoke about important pieces of legislation like the Office of Missing Persons, the CTA and things like that. But if you take a look at the Parliament itself, what we saw in the recent past was chaos, and on the day of the Venerable Thero's passing away we saw fights, and on top of that Mr. Kodituak has filed a petition once again saying that 92 representatives they've sold their third party vehicles to a third party. What is our Parliament doing?
Actually, this Parliament, they don't know the directions. Even have you seen any productive debate? The language they use, both sides are mudslinging. So there is no principally policy debates are happening. So what they try, basically, no time allocate for joint opposition. They are crying in that way. And also, Honorable Speaker, I am not criticizing. Most of the time, the questions raised by opposition members, answers are not given by the line minister.
They are not there in the Parliament.
No. Prime Minister answering all the questions. So this is where this Parliament, they are practicing for an executive Prime Minister now. So that's why I am just my observations. So most of the time, you say ministers are not there, but even can postpone. But who come forward and answer? Who control the House? Sometimes not the Honorable Speaker, but the Prime Minister. So this is where, even in Sri Lanka, most of these issues, Mitotamulla issue is there, Koskama issue is there, all these reliefs still not granted or not given. So even they are not speaking a thing like that. Sometimes Parliament immediately stopped for 1 hour, 2 hours, because the two-party government, one part is LFP, one part UNP, and they also cannot reconcile. So before going for reconciliation to the other parts of the country, first reconciliation must happen in the Parliament. That's my argument.
Mr. Dias, Code of Conduct for Parliamentarians was also promised during the 100 days of the government. What is happening to that? We are still seeing the same old Parliament that we saw from the past happening now as well. Is there any importance of this Code of Conduct for Parliament?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think if you take the governments after 1970, when we start getting government of 2/3, we see this unruly behavior, and where there's no, ethical practices, and then no constructive debates. So I think code of conduct is very important for the parliament, and also if you say that the substance of some of the dialogues or the debates are also, I think it has gone to very shallow levels of when it comes to content. I mean, there are no good speakers like those days, like N.M. Pereira or Colina De Silva. They every word they spoke, they talk with some substance. Today, when it comes, only very few people can talk on the subject and with substance. So I don't know how to address some of these things by code of conduct, but code of conduct is very important. Like what my good friend Mr. Kodituaku talk about, the selling the permits. It must be part of the code of conduct, and not only that, and even the issues like I don't know whether it should be part of the law, but at least the issues like citizenship.
Lasha, my question is very simple. I want to pose a question to you about these vehicle permits. Now, when you are given a permit, and if you can sell it, what is the problem in selling these permits?
Now, why you are given the vehicle is the issue. You are not getting this permit.
If the government has decided, if the parliament has decided, if the executive has decided to give the permits to the parliamentarians, what is wrong in these 92 parliamentarians selling their permits?
If they buy a very small 800cc vehicle, maybe I don't have any problem. But when they want to buy, they buy most expensive vehicle, and they get all the tax concession for those vehicles. It is our money, and they get the profit because they are earning profits. This is the issue where.
So it's an ethical problem.
It's an ethical problem,
It is not a problem relating to a violation of the law.
It's cheating because they were given this vehicle for their use, for their public affairs. But if they sell that vehicle, and if they earn profits out of it, then there's an issue.
Let's say they use this vehicle. Sorry, Chaduranga. No. Let's say they use this vehicle, then there is no problem. Is that what you're trying to say?
Of course. If they use that vehicle, they have to afford. Okay, if they buy very expensive vehicle, there is a certain amount that they also have to contribute. That means they can afford. If I have money, if I can buy a car, and as a parliamentarian, if I get my tax concessions, that's no problem because I'm not selling it. But if I use it for public affairs.
Ms. Koditaku, you had a former minister, a high-ranking minister, using his vehicle, and the petrol bill has come up to over 5 million rupees. And then you have the present minister in the same capacity having a bill of over 1.5 million. He is following in the footsteps of his predecessor.
We are just touching the surface of these issues. In my view,
yes, Mr. Koditaku,
there's a total lack of integrity in the cabinet of ministers and the parliamentarians. That's the major concern here. You mentioned that these permits are transferable and can be sold. No, it's wrong. There is no such provision in the law. These permits, I raised this issue when this lady was there, that Dilrukshi Das Vikram Singh was there.
As head of the Bribery Commission at
that time. This government, they took everything so lightly. When these permits are issued, that has to be done because the public finance in the hands of the parliament. The constitution provides, and the exempting of any tax or levying of anything has to be done in accordance with some law. And the customs law provides granting any exemption, as well as the excise special provision law also provide granting of any exemption, provided that is granted in the public interest. And when were these permits issued? These permits were issued in January, February, March 2016. Under what law these permits were issued? There's no reference whatsoever. The gazette notification issued under the excise special provision law. Only after I raised this issue, gazette notification issued under excise special provision law under section 3C in 2nd of May. So can they validate this permit with retrospective effect? And the other issue is, when someone sells his permits to, to somebody who is not entitled to, for this particular privilege, and abuse the tax revenue, it amounts to abuse of office for unjust enrichment. It's a punishable offence under the bribery law. There's an offence called new offence introduced under the bribery law, section 70, abuse of public office to confer a benefit or favour for the particular individual or somebody else. It comes within the definition of offence.
So, Ms. Kurtuaku, on the 10th of November 2016, you said that abuse of duty-free car permits by MPs is daylight robbery.
Yeah.
Do you still believe so?
Not just I believe, it's a fact. It's a fact. All these permits, that's why I don't want to mention some MPs, they really wanted to talk to me. But I know the people have informed them that because I have a different view about these individuals, they are very concerned about the role that I play. So therefore, I don't, because you know very well that the General Secretary of the
Has
UNP,
anyone approached you, Mr. Kurtuaku?
Yeah, what?
Has anyone approached you?
Yeah, definitely.
They have?
Yeah,
And
the number of people.
and this
Number of,
92
I don't want to
people-
mention the name. even a colleague.
So I
of
try
mine.
to say that there are more people. You have not mentioned the others' names because they came and met you.
Because now I am facing a very tremendous risk to my life. I must be, therefore I got to be extremely careful. You know, this Kabir Hashim, the UNP General Secretary, when this matter was taken up in the Supreme Court, I saw a statement made by him wherein he stated, we will not tolerate this kind of a corruption. And he said anyone who abuses office for any such activity will be dealt with very severely. That is the statement.
Mahadeva raises an eyebrow with regard to what exactly is happening right now. We saw how 58 vehicles were to be brought down for parliamentarians because of the intervention of the president. That stopped. However, we saw just 2 weeks ago on a Friday a supplementary budget estimate over 300 million comes into play to buy vehicles for parliamentarians as well as ministers, including a governor as well as an official. What is exactly happening? Public funds are again being not utilized properly. What exactly is happening?
Yeah, actually, as Lakshan said perfectly, 800cc, 1500cc, okay. Now,
You can't expect a minister to drive an
that's what I'm
800cc
telling.
vehicle, can you, Dr. Mana?
Why they are spending so long of money? To keep them in their side. There is a political agenda behind them. Most of the time, why you give all these luxurious things? See, there is a building in Rajagiri. How much they rent? And also, see, for the Vesak celebration, how much they spent? That building is just a vacated building. So this money, who is talking? And in the parliament, are you raising these issues? To keep them in your side, you will do anything luxurious. So that is the argument. That's why I said you can't expect a person to use 800 or 1500, but I'm telling, but India they are doing that.
Mr. Vana,
In other countries they are doing it.
1 month since the Meethodamula garbage dump collapse on the 14th
Yeah.
of, on Sunday. 1 year since the Samasara landslide to the 16th, that is tomorrow. But the ministers, the MPs, the
Koskama.
deputy ministers,
The other one is Koskama.
Salava is also closing 1 year. With all this happening, still we see the ministers passing supplementary estimates, as Shami just mentioned. Where are the priorities?
Yeah, that's why the politicians go and give some promises. They said we will give 50 lakhs. Now how much they have given? All this money they are using for their own benefits. For they are renting houses, purchasing cars and other things. So the general public must now see. Now where is the civil society? They should come forward and raise these issues. And then only even you can actually control these politicians. Now everyone is silent, not only GMO. The other civil society also now silent. They just have press conferences, that's all.
GMO is not certainly silent, Ms. Dr. Mahana. We just saw a few weeks ago. The GMO
No, for
is
these
launching
issues, they are really coming up with Saitam issue and other issues. But whatever the question he asked, they are silent.
Mr. Dias, now as Gihan pointed out, there are certain aspects of the right to information law that may be undermined by the counterterrorism law. So is it because that these laws are formulated in isolation? It's like a jigsaw puzzle, you deal with one piece at a time. Why is this? Why isn't there proper coordination or synergy?
I think whatever the counter-terrorism laws anywhere in the world, those are repressive. They don't bother about the people. They only bother about the institution. That is the government or the state. So not that there's no synergy. Not that they don't know about forgetting some of the RTI laws, purely because they want to maintain supremacy for these counter-terrorism laws. I'm a person who are against any type of counter-terrorism laws wherever in the world, because we will become slaves of these counter-terrorism laws. It happens with the PTA. I mean, the whole society blindly still supporting the PTA. They think this is to curb or this is to repress the terrorism, which is not. They are using this as a tool to silence the dissent. That's what happened in the whole 30-40 years in Sri Lankan PTA. I mean, in public eye, this is what they are doing. Okay, they are using against terrorism. But how many? I mean, initially they brought it as a law that going to against the Tamil militants. But how many Sinhala young people were killed? I mean, it was the same law. So I think not that they are unaware about the RTI provisions, purely because they bring this Counter-Terrorism Act under whatever name, and by any government historically for last 40 years, they want to maintain this repressiveness within them to stop dissent. So we will become, at one given point, we, the citizens, the public, the civil society, will become the victims of this proposed counter-terrorism law by whoever, whether it's brings by Mahinda Rajapaksa or Ranil Wickremesinghe or Maithripala Sirisena. We will be the victims. So whatever the government brings, any counter-terrorism law, it is not in favor of us.
Thank you very much, Blashan, for your thoughts in the first and second round. We're now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's transparency, good governance, and are we really doing the right thing? All this and more after the short commercial break. Stay connected. Stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. You're with Face the Nation. Let's start off the third round with Dr. Pratibha Mahanamaheva, a former commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission. Dr. Mahanamaheva, I want to drag your attention to one of the statements you made. You said that the parliament is getting ready for an executive prime minister. Now, based on the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa cannot certainly be the next president of the country. Does he think that he can be the next prime minister of Sri Lanka, based on the statement that you make? Because you say you try to draw a parallel to the activities of the present Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, but I want to move a little bit away from that and start thinking about the joint opposition right now. Does the joint opposition star, you could call him, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, think that he can be that person?
I don't know his wishes, so I don't know his views. But basically, what is happening in the parliament, I have seen most of the time who try to dominate, who try to control, and see these constitutional reforms. So there is one side argument to abolish executive presidency, but in the people representatives committees, a draft or a report is not there. But in future, definitely some of the ministers even in the government, they have one voice to abolish.
Welcome back. Sorry for the inconvenience. We had a very quick blackout, but the good news is we are back. Let's focus our attention again to Dr. Pratibha Mahanamaheva, the former commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission. He was talking about an alternative, spoke about the role of the joint opposition. Yes, Dr. Mahanamaheva, you can continue.
So therefore, the present Prime Minister try to dominate and to come up with the voice from these cabinet ministers to show what is in the cabinet final argument and cabinet decisions are totally going different way, different ministers are saying. So that's why it's time. Now your question whether the former president want to become the executive prime minister or not, still I can't say anything.
Dr. Mahan, I'm posing this question to you solely because you have the joint opposition protesting on many fronts. Right now they're saying that don't bring in a new constitution. It contravenes the sovereignty of the country. It affects the territorial integrity of the country and so on and so forth. However, this new constitution that is going to come into play, hopefully whenever it comes into play, is also going to talk about handing over the executive powers to the Prime Minister. So my question to you is, does the joint opposition silently think that and wishes for that this constitution has to come into play? Because given that track record, it doesn't seem that healthy.
Two ways I can tell. Even to comment anything, I have not seen an interim constitution like Nepal or in South Africa. Most of the countries, what they do, before they introduce a constitution, they put one thing that is called interim constitution for a public discourse or for a discussion. Now here what is happening, no one has seen that. So therefore even joint opposition or other opposition parties, they are waiting, they are welcome for an interim constitution, which is not there at the moment.
But even before this interim constitution comes into play, there is, even before this interim constitution comes into play, there is opposition from the joint opposition, saying that do not bring this
who should
particular constitution.
Who should propose this? Whether it should be from the opposition or whether it should be from the ruling party. The ruling party, before the election, they gave all these promises. Promise number one, to abolish executive president, which has not happened.
But there were many laws.
We have to wait and see.
But there were many amendments that were brought forward during the previous regime, like the 18th Amendment of the Constitution, which at one point all parliamentarians said, yes, go ahead, we will approve. And then when President Maithripala Sirisena was appointed, when he brought in the 19th Amendment of the Constitution, everyone said, okay, we don't want the 18th Amendment of the Constitution. So silently they said, okay, we really don't want this. And they said, okay, no, we want to approve the 19th Amendment of the Constitution. This is why I'm asking you. The joint opposition's track record doesn't really reflect what their futuristic thinking is all about, Dr. Mahana Meheva.
Normally when you are in the opposition, you have to play according to the government proposals. So they may not come up with anything immediately, this is the present constitution. So once they present it, they may come up with counter arguments. But only issue now, even the government is saying they are not going for any amendment in the constitution to a referendum. So that means basically the same constitution may exist with minimum reforms. That's my idea.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva, a former commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission. Dr. Mahanameheva is also an attorney at law. I now move my attention to Mr. Lakshan Das, attorney at law as well as human rights activist. Again, I want to drag your attention to a statement that you made in the first round. You said, history is repeating itself. If that is the case, what is the alternative?
Of what?
For governance.
Yes, I think before I go for that, I want to add one more thing. I think in our country, in the past, we have no practice of engaging with the opposition. I mean, what we see, finally, suddenly, very, very close to the elections, there is a manifesto, and then once they come into the power, they totally forget that manifesto. I mean, if you take the vehicle matter, in 1994 elections, the major promise from the then SLFP government was that we will not take these luxurious vehicles. We will limit ourselves to like double cabs. That was the promise made by the Chandrika Kumartunga government, and also it was part of the promise of Mahinda Rajapaksa. But once they came into power, they totally forget. So my idea is that we have to engage with the opposition before they come into power, because they are the next government always. So unless we engage, unless we challenge their thinking patterns, because today what we see is that we don't see any new dimension, any new thoughts coming from the opposition. They only thinking about grab the power when there's opportunity. So what they are going to do alternatively for this government, they will continue the same old patterns what they have done in the past. So people like Mr. Koditoka has to fight against them. So there's no end. There's no alternative. So my proposal is that we have to engage with the opposition if they come to power one day, that they have to be very clear. They will bring these changes. Not only that, they have to proclaim now itself, this is what we are going to do, and if the present government brings this kind of progressive bills, we will support that.
But what is the alternative? You are saying that the government is not on the right track, they have issues. If that is the case, do we really have an alternative at the moment, at present?
I mean, one alternative is change the government, but that we have to wait for another 3 years or 2.5 years. So, well, the public...
Let's say you are envisaging a change of government. If that is the case, which party do you think can really run the country?
That is where my... I mean, today when it comes to the civil society, in my opinion, civil society is getting weaker and weaker. And the shape of the civil society also changing. The center of the civil society is moving from the traditional civil society groups to different groups. But with all these things, I don't see any alternative at this moment. Because the party that needs to come into power, if there is election, or party that waiting to come into power, is not coming up with any solution, any changes, any new proposals for their government once they come into power. So this is what where are we now? We are in a very serious transition period where we don't know where are we heading towards. If the same old the previous regime comes into power in 3 years' time, and there's no use of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lakshan Dias, attorney at law as well as human rights activist. I now move my attention to Mr. Nagahananda Kulituaku, attorney at law. Mr. Kulituaku, when you really look at your track record, you've been a bit silent for nearly 12 years when the previous regime was in play. And then you became very vocal again after there was a change of government on the 8th of January. You were in the headlines, you made statements, you went to courts, and you made public known what you are fighting for. In the event you did all this when the previous regime was in power.
You must understand that I left Sri Lanka in 2001.
Yes.
Because there was a reason. There was a request made to the British High Commission by the then Director General of Customs. And he made a request that he cannot protect my life in this country because I normally won't tolerate any kind of wrongdoing. I take a very firm stand. Then I was granted international protection in the UK, so I was there for a long, long time. And at the request of President Rajapaksa, after this war was over, I was requested to return. And I had a one-to-one discussion and talk with him. And he wanted me to return to work, return to customs, so President Rajapaksa. I can recollect, he will regret about what I mentioned on that day. I mentioned two names. I mentioned the name of Lee Kuan Yew and Mahathir Mohamad. And I told him, if you allow, because in his manifesto, the second term manifesto very clearly said he will restore the rule of law and get rid of all bribery and corruption and so many things. And I said, I will definitely do that for you. I will do my utmost best. And your name will be, registered in this country like Lee Kuan Yew, provided you will not interfere with the administration of revenue agencies like customs, inland revenue and excise. That was the end of the discussion. Okay? Now, thereafter I returned to UK. And now you said that now I am really active. Now what I say, why we simply say now, this gentleman also said that, but then we talk about the opposition and the ruling party. Why? Now you know what had happened in France. why we not take this issue to the people and educate people? That's what I'm trying to do. Because I must really thankful to the Sirius, the only media that discuss with these issues. Whereas the other media, I mean, they are, for some reason, I can see when I appear in the Supreme Court for a very important matter, when there is a suspect like the drug dealer who was sent to jail, and media people, that is more concern for them. They have no interest whatsoever about the public interest litigation. So what I personally believe, we have a role to play. We must educate public. So I have launched my own website now. Every fortnight I release even yesterday, day before I release another one. I'm trying my best to educate people to get rid of these major political parties, both parties. There won't be any difference. If you get back to, if Rajapaksa is, return to power, there won't be any difference whatsoever. He will continue with his all policy. You know why he changed the constitution through the 18th Amendment? Because he became blind. That was the truth. He wanted to remain in power. That's what I'm trying to do even now. That is not the solution for this country.
Mr. Kurituaku, in 2004, you were 50 years of age. Am I right? In 2004,
I was not in Sri Lanka.
You were not in Sri Lanka, but you were 50 years of age.
Yeah, that's
50.
Right. Yeah.
You stayed at number 24 Valley Road, Lethwatch Garden City. Am I right?
Correct.
And you had a fundamental rights petition in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Saying that your fundamental rights have been violated.
Yeah.
2017, right now, you have a problem. You're saying that whistleblowers will not be protected. Gihan just mentioned that based on the new amendments that are coming into play, it's problematic. You can go to courts again, right?
Can go. But you know very well, certain statements made by Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe Singh in the parliament some time back, that's why I brought it here. He said the Supreme Court is trying to hijack our judicial power. Who made this statement in the parliament? The Prime Minister. It's a direct attack on the Supreme Court. Now, you know this 18th Amendment, no, this 19th Amendment, they promised people to restore the Constitutional Council. What happened at the end? 17th Amendment, that this 10-member Constitutional Council, there were 7 people with eminence and only 3 MPs. And if you read through this, the parliamentary proceeding, you will observe so many people in the joint opposition. They made it very clear. They said all 10 members has to be parliamentarian. What is the objective? That means you will never get a very straightforward, upright judge in this court system.
Mr. Kurituaku, I want to get back to my earlier question. Let me be a bit more precise now.
Yeah.
2004, when you went to Supreme Court, you had the utmost respect and confidence in the Supreme Court of the country, the judiciary of the country.
Yeah.
And that is why you go to the courts saying that your fundamental rights have been violated. And you cite the former Director General of Customs as a respondent as well in this case.
Yeah.
2017 now, several years later, you're nearly 62 years old now.
Yeah. I'm reaching 63 now. Yeah.
63
Still,
now.
I have not been even given my even the pension.
Yes, but
I
my
was in the
question to you is,
custom for
do you have the
25
same confidence in the judiciary now, at 63 years of age?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nagahandha Kurituaku, attorney at law. Let's now move our attention to Gihan Gunathilaka, Research Director, Veta Research, and also attorney at law. Quite alarming facts revealed by Lakshan Dias. You heard Dr. Mahana Mehva saying about the joint opposition, the ultimate intentions, and then you had Mr. Kurituaku talking about fundamental rights and losing confidence in the judiciary in the year 2017. What's happening, Gihan? Is this the way forward for a country like Sri Lanka? Because we envisage change on the 8th of January 2015, two and a half years down the line. Seems that people are not really satisfied that their ultimate objectives have been met.